From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
The GBU-43 is a large, powerful, and accurately delivered weapon. The United States took all precautions necessary to prevent civilian casualties and collateral damage as a result of the operation.
The mother of all bombs. That's what the U.S. just dropped on Afghanistan. It's the most powerful non-nuclear bomb ever, unleashing an explosion equivalent to 11 tons of TNT with a mile-wide blast radius. We'll go to Kabul to get reaction, and we'll speak with Kathy Kelly of Voices for Creative Nonviolence about their campaign to end U.S. military and economic warfare. She's just back from Afghanistan and is now among 20 peace activists who are on day 5 of a vigilant fast in front of the United Nations to protest the ongoing U.S. support for the Saudi bombing of Yemen.
We're hoping that through this fast and vigil time, people all across the United States will start to recognize that we can't turn the other way and ignore what is happening in Yemen. We also hope that through bringing people together in this concern, we will start to pay greater attention to South Sudan, Nigeria, Somalia, countries nearby, which are also nearing a trio of near-famine conditions.
Then hundreds of undocumented immigrants are on hunger strike to protest the conditions and extremely low wages at the for-profit Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, Washington.
My name is Jonathan Rodriguez-Guzman, and I would just like to let people know that I'm doing a hunger strike, just not for me, but for everybody out there in the future.
The hunger strikers are demanding better food, hygiene, and medical care within the prison, which is owned by the major private prison corporation, GEO Group. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In Afghanistan, the United States military on Thursday dropped its most powerful non-nuclear bomb ever, the Massive Ordnance Air Blast, or MOAB, nicknamed the mother of all bombs, on the Achin district near the Pakistan border. The 21,600-pound bomb reportedly unleashed an explosion equivalent to 11 tons of TNT with a mile-wide blast radius. Bill Roggio of the Foundation for Defensive Democracies told the Military Times, quote, "What it does is basically suck out all of the oxygen and lights the air on fire." White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer acknowledged the attack.
The GBU-43 is a large, powerful, and accurately delivered weapon. We targeted a system of tunnels and caves that ISIS fighters used to move around freely, making it easier for them to target U.S. military advisors and Afghan forces in the area. The United States took all precautions necessary to prevent civilian casualties and collateral damage as a result of the operation.
Thursday's blast was so powerful it shook the ground in neighboring districts. A parliamentarian from Nangarhar province told The Guardian the explosion killed a teacher and his young son. Other Afghan officials said 36 ISIS fighters were killed. The U.S.-backed former president of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai, denounced Thursday's attack, saying, quote, "This is not the war on terror, but the inhuman and most brutal misuse of our country as testing ground for new and dangerous weapons." Mark Arlasco, a Bush-era Pentagon official, told The Intercept the weapon was built for use in Iraq but never used, quote, "due to collateral damage concerns." At the White House, President Trump said he was very, very proud of those who carried out the bombing.
Did you authorize it, sir?
Everybody knows exactly what happened, and what I do is I authorize my military. We have the greatest military in the world, and they've done a job as usual. So we have given them total authorization, and that's what they're doing. And frankly, that's why they've been so successful lately.
Democratic Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California said in a statement, quote, "President Trump owes the American people an explanation about his escalation of military force in Afghanistan and his long-term strategy to defeat ISIS." We'll have more on the attack in Afghanistan by going to Kabul and also speaking with Kathy Kelly. In Syria, the Pentagon says a U.S.-led coalition airstrike in Tabqa killed 18 Syrian rebels backed by the United States. U.S. Central Command said in a statement the attack accidentally targeted fighters with the U.S.-supported SDF rebel alliance who requested air support in a fight against ISIS. CENTCOM offered condolences and called the deaths tragic. The attack followed a series of coalition raids that killed civilians. The journalistic monitoring group Air Wars cited 4 separate U.S.-led airstrikes in April alone that killed 24 non-combatants. Meanwhile, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has denied his forces used poison gas to attack a rebel-held town in Idlib, which killed 87 people, including more than 30 children. In an interview recorded Wednesday with the AFP news agency, Assad said reports of the attack were 100% fabricated.
There was no order to make any attack. We don't have any chemical weapons. We gave up our arsenals a few years ago. Even if we have them, we wouldn't use them, and we had never used our chemical arsenal in our history.
Assad suggested that children seen in widely circulated video of the incident were in fact child actors pretending to be dead. Assad's interview was broadcast as inspectors with the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons said Thursday samples taken from the site tested positive for the nerve agent sarin. Elsewhere in Syria, rebel groups and Syria's government have begun an exchange that could see the relocation of some 30,000 residents. If completed, the deal would see civilians in 2 towns besieged by rebels exchanged for residents of 2 towns cut off by government forces. NBC News is reporting the Trump administration is prepared to launch a preemptive attack on North Korea if it proceeds towards a nuclear weapons test. NBC cited multiple senior U.S. intelligence officials who say a pair of U.S. naval destroyers are positioned near North Korea's nuclear test site and prepared to fire Tomahawk cruise missiles. The Pentagon declined to comment on the NBC report. North Korea Thursday condemned the U.S. for bringing an aircraft carrier group and other nuclear-armed assets into the region, threatening an assault on South Korea, Japan, and U.S. bases. In Beijing, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi urged the U.S. and North Korea to de-escalate.
On the issue of the Korean Peninsula, it's not about who can say the most hateful words, about who can raise the biggest fist, who will win. Rather, once war breaks out, there will be losses on all sides. No one is the real winner.
U.S. intelligence officials claim North Korea is preparing what would be its 6th nuclear weapons test, possibly as early as Saturday, which marks the 105th anniversary of the birth of the country's founder, Kim Il-sung. The anniversary comes as Vice President Mike Pence is scheduled to travel to Seoul, South Korea, Sunday to kick off a 10-day trip to Asia. President Trump signed legislation Thursday that'll allow states to withhold federal funds to Planned Parenthood and other women's health clinics that provide abortions. The bill narrowly passed the Senate in March when Vice President Pence cast a tie-breaking vote in favor of the bill. In a statement, Planned Parenthood Vice President Don Lagun said the Trump administration had launched the worst political attack on women's health in a generation, writing, quote, "People are sick and tired of politicians making it even harder for them to access health care, and this bill is just the latest example," she said. In New York, police arrested 25 people in the lobby of Trump Tower as they staged a protest against President Trump and his administration. The protesters chanted, "No ban, no raids, no wall," citing Trump's attempts to ban Muslim travelers, ICE immigration raids, and Trump's plan to expand the wall on the U.S.-Mexico border. CIA Chief Mike Pompeo blasted WikiLeaks Thursday as a, quote, "hostile intelligence service," unquote, in a stark reversal from his previous praise for the group. Pompeo made the remarks at a Washington, D.C. think tank in his first public address as director of the Central Intelligence Agency.
It's time to call out WikiLeaks for what it really is: a non-state hostile intelligence service often abetted by state actors like Russia. In reality, they champion nothing but their own celebrity. Their currency is clickbait. Their moral compass non-existent. Their mission, personal self-aggrandizement through destruction of Western values.
CIA Director Pompeo went on to call WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange a narcissist and a fraud who would have sided with dictators in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. Last July, then Congress member Pompeo praised WikiLeaks for publishing emails hacked from the servers of the Democratic National Convention, writing in a tweet that has since been deleted, quote, "Need further proof that the fix was in from President Obama on down? Busted." He said. 19,252 emails from DNC leaked by WikiLeaks, ended the tweet. In Libya, at least 97 African migrants are missing and feared dead after their boat capsized Thursday in the Mediterranean near Tripoli. Libya's Coast Guard said it rescued 23 survivors. According to the International Organization for Migration, the IOM, at least 590 migrants have died attempting the dangerous ocean voyage to Italy so far this year. In Brazil, a Supreme Court judge has launched a corruption probe into 98 politicians for allegedly taking bribes from a Brazilian construction firm. Among those under investigation are 8 members of President Michel Temer's cabinet, the heads of both chambers of Congress, and dozens of senior lawmakers. This is political scientist Geraldo Tadeu of the State University of Rio de Janeiro.
This demonstrates that we are talking about a system that drains public resources, a corrupt system that needs to be and must be uncovered. These investigations have to go deep so that we can reduce the level of corruption.
Last month, a federal court sentenced Brazil's former Speaker of the lower house, Eduardo Cunha, to more than 15 years in prison for corruption. Cunha was a key leader in the push to impeach Dilma Rousseff, who was Brazil's first female president, in a process Rousseff and others have called a coup. In Arkansas, death penalty opponents are set to rally at the state capitol in Little Rock today for a Good Friday protest ahead of the planned execution of 7 prisoners over an 11-day stretch. Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson has approved the plan, which would see Bruce Earl Ward and Don William Davis put to death by lethal injection Monday in back-to-back executions. 5 more prisoners are scheduled to die before the end of April, when the state's supply of the sedative midazolam, one of 3 drugs used by Arkansas to stop prisoners' heartbeat, is set to expire. This is Robert Dunham of the Death Penalty Information Center.
Arkansas has a supply of the drug midazolam. That supply expires on April 30th. Think of it as if you were shopping in the supermarket and there's a use-by date. Well, what Arkansas has essentially done is taken the concept of the use-by date and converted it to a kill-by date.
On Thursday, a pair of pharmaceutical companies filed suit in federal court seeking to prevent their drugs from being used in the execution, saying Arkansas acquired its supplies of potassium chloride and midazolam from an unauthorized seller. The lawyer for a United Airlines passenger who was beaten and dragged from a flight by airport security guards said Thursday his client lost 2 teeth, suffered a broken nose and concussion, and might need reconstructive surgery. Dr. David Dow sustained the injuries after the airline ordered him to leave his seat on a Kentucky-bound flight last Sunday, saying it was overbooked, and then called in Chicago Department of Aviation security officers to forcibly remove the 69-year-old physician when he refused. At a news conference Thursday, Dr. Dow's daughter, Crystal Dow Pepper, said the incident has left her family scarred.
It has been a very difficult time for our entire family, especially my dad, and we are truly grateful for your support. What happened to my dad should have never happened to any human being, regardless of the circumstance.
Dr. Dow's lawyer said his client would probably sue United and the city of Chicago over the incident. And Canada has taken a major step towards legalizing the recreational use of marijuana. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau Thursday unveiled a bill that would allow adults to possess up to 1 ounce of the drug while strictly licensing and regulating growers. Among those supporting the legislation is Ralph Goodale, Canada's Minister of Public Safety.
If your objective is to protect public health and safety and keep cannabis out of the hands of minors and stop the flow of illegal profits to organized crime, then the law as it stands today has been an abject failure. Police forces spend between $2 and $3 billion every year trying to deal with cannabis, yet Canadian teenagers are among the heaviest users in the Western world. And criminals pocket $7 to $8 billion in illicit proceeds. We simply have to do better.
If the bill is approved, Canada would join Uruguay as the only nations to fully legalize recreational marijuana use. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In Afghanistan, the United States military dropped its most powerful non-nuclear bomb ever, the Massive Ordnance Air Blast, or MOAB, nicknamed the mother of all bombs. The U.S. military dropped it on Achin district near the Pakistan border. The 21,600-pound bomb reportedly unleashed an explosion equivalent to 11 tons of TNT with a mile-wide blast radius. Bill Roggio of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies told the Military Times, quote, "What it does is basically suck out all of the oxygen and lights the air on fire." This is White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer.
The GBU-43 is a large, powerful, and accurately delivered weapon. We targeted a system of tunnels and caves that ISIS fighters used to move around freely, making it easier for them to target U.S. military advisors and Afghan forces in the area. The United States took all precautions necessary to prevent civilian casualties and collateral damage as a result of the operation.
Thursday's blast was so powerful it shook the ground in neighboring districts. A parliamentarian from Nangarhar province told The Guardian the explosion killed a teacher and his young son. The U.S.-backed former president of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai, denounced Thursday's attack. He said, "This is not the war on terror, but the inhuman and most brutal misuse of our country as testing ground for new and dangerous weapons." Mark Arlasco, a Bush-era Pentagon official, told The Intercept the weapon was built for use in Iraq but never used due to collateral damage concerns. At the White House, President Trump said he was very, very proud of those who carried out the bombing.
Very, very proud of the people. Really another successful job. We're very, very proud of our military. Just like we're proud of the folks in this room, we are so proud of our military, and it was another successful event.
Did you authorize it, sir?
Everybody knows exactly what happened. And what I do is I authorize my military. We have the greatest military in the world, and they've done a job as usual.
Democratic Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California said in a statement, quote, "President Trump owes the American people an explanation about his escalation of military force in Afghanistan and his long-term strategy to defeat ISIS." The U.S.-backed former president of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai, denounced Thursday's attack. He said, quote, "This is not the war on terror, but the inhuman and most brutal misuse of our country as testing ground for new and dangerous weapons." We're going to turn right now to our guests, both in studio and also we'll be going to Kabul after break to speak to people in Afghanistan. We turn right now to Kathy Kelly, who is with Voices for Creative Nonviolence. She was twice nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. We're also joined here in our studio by Wajma Usman, who is professor of media culture, communication at Temple University. She's a member of Afghan American Artists and Writers Association and co-producer and director of Postcards from Tora Bora. Let's begin with Wajma, your response to what took place. The largest bomb, non-nuclear, was dropped on Afghanistan, the largest bomb in the history of the world, outside the 2 atomic bombs that were dropped on Japan. Your thoughts?
Well, ever since we found out about what happened yesterday, my organization, Afghan American Artists and Writers Association, and in dialogue with my family, we've all been trying to wrap our brain around why a bomb of this magnitude would be dropped on a people that have already been traumatized by and terrorized by almost 4 decades of war. And it's partially because the war hawks are empowered by the Trump administration, and they call this psychological warfare, and it's back to the shock and awe, so overwhelm them with sheer firepower. But this isn't going to subdue ISIS or the Taliban. It's not going to subdue them into submission. What's going to happen is it's going to kill more innocent people and enrage people and radicalize people to join the ranks of the ISIS and Taliban. So contrary to what they're saying, that this is counterterrorism measure strategy. This is actually creating terrorism. This is a big setback for peace. That's our mission with AWA. We want to make that clear. And it's a big setback for peace, not just in the region of Afghanistan and Pakistan, but globally. And it's a huge win for the war hawks and warlords, both in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and in the U.S. And I think what people don't realize is that ISIS and the Taliban have been losing support. Not that they had that much to begin with, but they've been losing support, and the tide of public opinion has been turning against them because they've been terrorizing people in the region with suicide bombs, with publicly beheading journalists and all types of things. And this undoes that. So it's going to turn people back towards supporting them and joining their ranks. And I think what's also important to keep in mind is that this undoes all the hard work that local reformers and progressive people have been doing on the ground there, as well as the international donor community. Since 9/11, over 90 countries have invested in civic approaches as opposed to military approaches to rebuilding the nation with educational programs, economic programs, to give people some hope. People there, just like here, want peace and security and want a better future. And so this thwarts the peace process that people have worked for, including the U.S. government. The U.S. government has successfully initiated many nation-building projects, including building the media sector, training media professionals, and once again, the economy and education. And this is a big blow and a big step backwards for everybody who's been working for peace in the region.
Kathy Kelly, you're here in New York because you're on a hunger fast against U.S. militarism. You're protesting outside of the United Nations. But you just recently came back from Afghanistan. First, your response to the dropping of this, what the U.S. military as well calls the mother of all bombs, developed during the Bush years, but not used by President Bush or President Obama because of the massive concern about civilian casualties. It has a mile blast radius.
Well, I think the mother of all bombs is really greed. It's greed on the part of the people who are just itching to pull the trigger and try out their latest, but to try it out over Afghanistan, a country where the air and the water are already so horribly contaminated. I mean, just having come back from Afghanistan, you wonder how people make it through those very harsh winters when the air is so terribly polluted. I mean, people brush their teeth and they're dealing with black saliva. The children in the refugee camps are going without breakfast, lunch, and dinner sometimes. Mothers weep and say, I can't feed my children. And now there will be more refugees because who knows what that bomb has done to the water. And sure, it's had a psychological effect. People are terrified. So it's a country that's already got 1.5 million refugees. Kabul is so filled with people who are unemployed and have no food that it's the children who go out and do the labor. 1.8 million are going to be pushed back into Afghanistan if Iran and Pakistan and Europe go ahead with plans to force people to go back. And so the United States has put $112 billion into non-military programs. But what can we see as the result of those programs? So don't we think this is going to feed, as Wajma has said, resentment and anger and a desire for revenge? And, where are all these guns coming from? It's the United States, according to C.J. Chivers in the New York Times a year ago, that bought probably 700,000 pistols, assault rifles, carbines, weapons into Afghanistan, and that's where the jihadist groups get their weapons.
We're going to go to break and then come back to this conversation with Kathy Kelly, nominated twice for a Nobel Peace Prize on hunger fast against violence in front of the UN right now, as well as Wajma Usman, who is a professor of media, culture, and communication at Temple University. She is Afghan-American. And we're going to go to Kabul to speak with guests in Afghanistan. Stay with us. Nightfall by Rabi Abu Khalil. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. It's called the mother of all bombs. That's what the U.S. just dropped on Afghanistan, the most powerful non-nuclear bomb ever released in the history of the world. It was unleashed an explosion equivalent to 11 tons of TNT. Its blast radius 1 mile wide. We're in studio with Kathy Kelly of Voices for Creative Nonviolence, just back from Afghanistan, and Wajma Usman, Temple University professor of media, culture, and communication. We are joined in Kabul by two guests. They're standing with their backs to the camera to conceal their identity. Basir Bita is a mentor with Afghan youth peace volunteers, and Dr. Hakim is a medical doctor who's provided humanitarian relief in Afghanistan for over a decade, working for Afghan Peace Volunteers, the interethnic group of young Afghans dedicated to building nonviolent alternatives to war. We welcome you all to Democracy Now! I'm sorry we cannot see your face. In fact, Dr. Hakim, we've had you on in profile before. Talk about why you don't want your face to be seen.
There are security concerns here, but Amy, thank you for having us on the show. My worries are really the worries shared by the Association or Federation of Atomic Scientists, who for the year 2017 decided to turn the doomsday clock from 4 minutes to midnight to 3.5 minutes to midnight, precisely because Trump became the president, and the policies, including this dropping of the bomb over Afghanistan, does cause me and Basir great concern about the safety not only of all of us on the planet, but of the Earth as well.
And can you talk about the effects of the bomb that was just dropped, what's called by the U.S. military, the mother of all bombs, with this mile-wide radius? Now, the Pentagon just released the video footage of the bomb. It's not a bunker buster bomb. It's a bomb that explodes above ground. But they haven't released the casualty figures.
I'll speak before Basir talks about some of the accounts he's heard from people in and around Achin district. I think it's an insult to nickname the bomb the mother of all bombs. This morning, as I was speaking to one of the Afghan peace volunteers, Ali, he said, would any mother do that? Would any mother do that to Mother Earth, or would any mother do this to any children? The effect is what the U.S. military, or what militaries across the world want to inflict upon ordinary citizens, which is fear, panic, hunger, anger. And I think that's what they will get. Looking at the figures from Global Terrorism Index, Americans and people from all over the world should ask why, like Wajma had indicated earlier. The Global Terrorism Index indicates that whatever bombs that the Americans have dropped in Afghanistan or anywhere else in the world has resulted in terrorism increasing, not decreasing. So why drop it? Why drop this mother of all bombs? It's such an insult to all of us. Basir.
Basir Bita, if you can talk about, yes, Basir, what you have heard about the reaction to this bomb.
Before speaking about the reactions of Afghans regarding to the incidents, I would like to speak about myself. I lost my grandparents, I lost my uncles, my aunts, very close friends, nieces, nephews, over the last 2 decades. And speaking about the accounts, personally, I feel frustrated because of though the government claims that it was an organized event, but today I heard that President's National Security Advisor Several hours before the bomb was launched, he was on the scene, assessing the area. And the other one is myself. I don't want to lose any other Afghans. I don't want to lose any other friends in the area. I mean, it's as Hakim phrased it, it's an insult to all Afghans.
Explain why it is an insult.
It is an insult to us because of losing relatives, losing friends. I mean, imagine the president, Trump, who is now praising what the U.S. forces carried in Achin district. Imagine relatives of President Trump were in Achin district. And they claim that, I don't believe this claim, but they claim that local residents who are around 100,000 people left the area a couple of hours before the bomb was launched. I mean, what if the president is a mother, the president's daughter, the president's son were there?
And talk about what people are saying on the ground.
People are saying different things. I mean, as in local civil society activists, I mean, there is no one rising his voice against what the U.S. government did to us. I mean, I can't find, personally, I can't find any Afghan activist or any Afghan authority to sort of condemn it. Though the president, Hamid Karzai, ex-president, he condemned it by strongest words. But I'm pretty sure that if he was the president now, the current president, he would support the idea. But the people, ordinary people, some people condemn it. I mean, in the area, in Nangarhar or in the district, people from the same district living in Kabul, they condemn it strongly.
I have to say, what we're showing right now are the backs of our guests afraid to show their faces in Afghanistan because of how dangerous it is there, and the footage released by the Pentagon. The latest footage of the bomb, what the military calls the mother of all bombs, this massive ordnance air bomb, Moab, almost looks like a strange, distorted sonogram, extremely sterile, Kathy Kelly. Of course, you don't see any people. You don't see people dying. We don't know the actual figures at this point. And the same thing happened in Syria last week, where the Pentagon released immediately the cruise missile images as they're taking off of the warships, like we saw shock and awe, not the people on the ground running in 2003 in Iraq, but the blasts in the sky that almost look like fireworks. One also has to wonder about the timing of this attack that took place on Thursday, the U.S. releasing the largest bomb in the history of the world outside of the 2 nuclear bombs dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This coming just after the Pentagon has released the information that they mistakenly bombed 18 and killed 18 U.S. allies, 18 Syrian fighters who were fighting with the United States, alongside the United States. Your thoughts?
Well, I think, we've seen this word exceptionalism many times, and we have to recognize that the United States has communicated to other people all around the world that U.S. lives matter, and that there's almost utter disregard for the lives of people who are bearing the brunt of our wars. And this doesn't seem to stop the proclivity of the U.S. military to say we want to launch yet another war. I mean, here we are wondering, will it be North Korea? Will it be Iran? And I mean, I'm with a group of people right now focused on Yemen. And once again, we're looking at the poorest country in the Arab world, and it's being subjected to siege, to bombardment. Well, what kind of image does this communicate about the United States all around the world? I think we're looked upon as a fearful, menacing group of the most well-equipped warlords with the most expensive, horrific weapons. And it seems to me, we're sort of moving toward the doorway toward a nuclear exchange when we can so cavalierly drop this bomb in an area of the world where I suppose the military is chafing, as they would, because of the death of one United States military person a few days, it might have been over a week now, earlier. But are we to say that the life of one U.S. soldier is worth so much more than the lives of poor people? Well, it cost at the height of the surge in Afghanistan $2 million to keep one U.S. soldier in Afghanistan. And the cost to put iodized salt into the diet of a child would have been 5 cents per child per year. I think about the tunnels that they say they destroyed. Well, how are we to know? We were told that we had to go into Iraq with our massive 2003 shock and awe because of weapons of mass destruction, but those were never found. How will we know if the tunnels were ever there? They've all been exploded. But, what if we were to make tunnels through which the United States weapons would be moved? The C-130 transports that transfer soldiers, the D-9 bulldozers, the Apache helicopters, this huge Moab bomb today, and those tunnels to transport that weaponry would be the size of the Grand Canyon. And yet we're to be deeply concerned because people dug tunnels in the area where this fighting is going on. Well, the drone operators call the people who run away from their bombs squirters. And you have to wonder, when I read about the bombing in Yemen of families who lived near the place where this special operations were going on, they were running for their lives, and they were killed. Well, they might have well wished there were some tunnels through which they might have run and disappeared.
I wanted to ask Wajma Usman about your own family's history. It is not clear what these tunnels were. The CNN says the mountains where ISIS made their base were the same ones used by bin Laden as a bolt hole and the same used by the CIA-backed Mujahideen when they were fighting the Soviets in the 80s, maybe built by the U.S.-backed Mujahideen, these tunnels, so the U.S. might well know exactly what the map of this is. Talk about this history.
Well, my family became refugees, and we lived in the border areas between Afghanistan and Pakistan for 4 years. So I'm familiar with this area. And although I haven't been to Achin, I've lived in Peshawar and spent time in Jalalabad, Torkham, the Swat Valley. And all of those are big cities that are within an hour-and-a-half radius of Achin. And I've been to the other areas, smaller towns around Achin. And so, this is a media mythology that they create, that they keep on saying it's remote, it's desolate, and it's isolated. And it goes back to the mythology that they created earlier in the War on Terror with smoke them out of their caves. But in reality, those areas are bustling towns and villages. There's, people living there. And so the idea of this bomb accurately targeting a few ISIS militants in the caves is not correct. This impacts countless people, as I said, in areas that are thriving with people who have, they have hospitals and schools and other things. But the thing to also keep in mind is that that area has been created as a buffer zone or an in-between zone by the British during the Anglo-Afghan Wars, and it was to protect British India back then and separate it from Afghanistan. And so what that means for the people living in the area is that some parts are virtually under no laws, whereas other parts people are living under contradictory, draconian laws from that era. And so there's virtually no government oversight or protection for the population there. They're vulnerable. And this is part of the reason why this area has been targeted repeatedly by drones, is that nobody's standing up for these people, right? Nobody's standing up for their rights to live peaceably. And what happens is both the Pakistani and the Afghan government have been in collusion with the U.S. government to make this area essentially an experimental testing ground for these dangerous, destructive weapons of war. And it's essentially shrouded in secrecy, right? So it's a perfect place for them to be judge, jury, and executioner of people without giving them any due process of the law, because it's away from the international gaze and it's away from all the news bureaus of the media.
I wanted to turn back to Kabul, Afghanistan, where Dr. Hakim and Basar Bitta are standing with their backs to the camera, afraid of being identified in a very dangerous area. And I wanted to ask you each about what you think the alternative is today, the alternative to the U.S. dropping bombs in Afghanistan. Dr. Hakim.
I will talk about two things. There's so many alternatives, Amy. Thank you for asking that question. The reason why we can't, as a human species, now think of enough alternatives is because we are not imagining enough, we are not asking enough questions. So one of the concrete things that can be done is what the Afghan Peace Volunteers is doing, is to ask questions. Wake up every day, educate one another, ask why, ask how, ask what. And in asking those questions is really educating ourselves. Education is one of the concrete ways in which we can address this disaster that the world is facing, both for the planet and for the human race. And the second thing that we can do, I can learn from the Afghan Peace Volunteers, is to do practical things for the earth and for one another. Like some youth go out and use permaculture techniques to take care of Mother Earth. Now that is really taking care of the mother. That, you know, moving totally and radically away from these deceptive narratives of the mother of all bombs and glorifying what we ought not to be glorifying. Changing the whole political situation in our own individual lives. Just don't give any space to people like Trump. He's really behaving in a very ugly way. I have nothing against Trump. He's a human and I respect him, but his actions is really something that I would be, as a medical doctor, very ashamed of, because it's not based on evidence and it's not based on fact. It is really a show. And so we should question it, we should change it in our lives. Don't submit to any leader of any country of the world if they do things without evidence, and if they make decisions for 30 million people in Afghanistan, and he's over there in the White House, he's so far away. And the third thing that we can do is to talk to one another. Go talk to the people in Achin district. Find the courage to talk to them. Talk to a mother. Just before this conversation, I had a class of Afghan Peace Volunteers, street kids, and I asked them to imagine the bombing of this bombing in Achin district, and they closed their eyes and they heard this story of the mother of all bombs being dropped in Achin district. They imagined themselves as a mother in that district, and the response is from that is, we are sad, we are so sad that we are being treated this way in Achin, that people, fellow Afghans in Achin district, are being treated this way.
And
so
Basar
talk to one another. That's one.
Basar Bitta, we have 20 seconds before we lose our satellite connection to you. Your thoughts?
Speaking very briefly, I think one is, as Hakim put it, public awareness, finding grassroots and locally acceptable ideas like conversation, establishing dialogue, and
we have just lost our guests in Afghanistan. We have been speaking with Basar Bitta as well as Dr. Hakim, both with Afghan youth peace volunteers in Kabul, Afghanistan, speaking to us with their backs to the camera to protect their identities. I want to thank our guests here, Wajma Usman of Temple University, Professor of Media Culture and Communications, as well as Kathy Kelly. Kathy, I want to speak with you after the broadcast about your protest here, particularly around Yemen, and then we're going to post it online at DemocracyNow.org. When we come back from break, we're going to Tacoma, Washington, to talk about why hundreds of immigrant prisoners are staging a hunger strike. And we're going to hear from Ralph Nader, the man who sued the airlines for overbooking, and how that relates to the 69-year-old doctor who was beaten and dragged by airport security off of a United flight. This is Democracy Now! Stay with us. Frankenstein Ska by Byron Lee and the Dragonaires. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. On Thursday, the lawyer for a United Airlines passenger who was beaten and dragged from a flight by airport security guards said his client lost 2 teeth, suffered a broken nose and concussion, and might need reconstructive surgery. Dr. David Dow sustained the injuries after United Airlines ordered him off the plane, leaving his paid seat on his Chicago to Louisville, Kentucky flight last Sunday. The airline said they needed the seats for their own employees. United then called in Chicago Department of Aviation security officers to forcibly remove the 69-year-old physician when he refused, and they dragged him down the aisle off the flight. We turn now to Ralph Nader, longtime consumer advocate, many-time presidential candidate, who back in the early 70s helped force airlines to begin compensating passengers bumped from their flights. I spoke to Ralph Nader last night and asked him to explain how he did this.
On a bright morning in April 1972, I went to National Airport in Washington, take an Allegheny Airline flight to address a large downtown rally in Hartford, Connecticut at noon. And I got there with a confirmed ticket, and they said, the plane is full, you can't get on the plane. I said, I have a confirmed ticket and a confirmed seat. I'm sorry, the plane is full. Behind me was an assistant to Senator Ribicoff, whose name was John Koskinen, who's now the IRS commissioner. And he was bumped too. So I found myself a wonderful public interest lawyer, Reuben Robertson. He took it all the way up to the Supreme Court. In a 9-0 decision, the court ruled that if you are bumped with a confirmed reservation, you have a case under the doctrine of fraudulent misrepresentation. And so we went down to the lower court and the Civil Aeronautics Board, and they required the airlines to put a notice on the ticket counter in all of our tickets saying that if we are bumped, we're entitled to some form of compensation. What form was to be decided by the airlines, and they decided to auction off the seats. And it worked like a charm 99% of the time. And where it doesn't work is where the airline gets chintzy and offers vouchers instead of cash. And what United Airlines did, and the flight from Chicago to Louisville, when they wanted to get 4 seats emptied for 4 flight attendants deadheading it to Louisville to get on another plane, was offer vouchers that expire in 1 year. And they got 3 out of the 4, and they picked a doctor, Dow, and called the security when he objected, and dragged them off the plane, and a billion people have seen that. But why did they do that? Because they didn't want to offer cash. And why didn't the customer have a right to stay on? Because the contract of carriage, which is on the UAW website, is 67,000 words long and fine print, and it takes away the rights to be assured that when you have a confirmed reservation and you're in the seat, you can stay in the seat. Total unbridled discretion by the airline to throw you off the plane. So now the stage is set, because so many people are outraged, for getting the Passenger Bill of Rights legislation through Congress, which has been mired for decades because of the airline lobby. So it all started with a lawsuit.
To see the whole interview with Ralph Nader, you can go to DemocracyNow.org. Ralph Nader is the founder of the American Museum of Tort Law, which is located in his hometown of Winsted, Connecticut. It's been reported that all the passengers on the United flight have been offered a refund by United if they sign on the dotted line that they will not sue the airlines. This is Democracy Now!, DemocracyNow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We go now to Washington State, where hundreds of undocumented immigrants are on hunger strike to protest the conditions and extremely low wages at the for-profit immigrant prison, the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma. On Thursday morning, activists say women imprisoned within the prison joined the strike, which now includes more than 700 immigrants, or about half the population of the for-profit prison. Hunger strikers are demanding better food, hygiene, medical care within the prison, which is owned by the major private prison corporation Geo Group. Organizers say prisoners have also launched work stoppages to protest the fact they're paid only $1 a day to cook, to clean, to do laundry necessary to keep the prison running. Geo Group is facing a class action lawsuit arguing the company violates federal anti-slavery laws at its Aurora, Colorado prison, where it also pays only $1 a day. This is an audio recording of hunger striker Jonathan Rodriguez Guzman. Listen closely.
My name is Jonathan Rodriguez Guzman, and I would just like to let people know that I'm doing a hunger strike, just not for me, but for everybody out there in the future.
The strike began on Monday at noon, with more than 100 prisoners refusing to eat lunch. Since then, activists have been supporting the hunger strikers with an ongoing 24-hour encampment outside the Tacoma jail. The strikes come as Attorney General Jeff Sessions traveled to the U.S.-Mexico border in Nogales, Arizona this week, where he met with U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents and vowed a major crackdown, calling immigration, quote, an attack on our national security. Immigration advocates say the Trump administration's crackdown against immigration and immigrants living within the United States has led to more immigrants being imprisoned at jails, including at the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma. On Thursday, the New York Times reported in its scramble to find new places to house immigrants arrested in ICE raids, the Trump administration's trying to curtail protections for immigrants being held in county jails, including doing away with the requirement that immigrants have access to translation services. For more, we're joined by two guests. Mara Villalpando is an activist and undocumented immigrant with the group Northwest Detention Center Resistance and the group Mi Gente. And Alexis Erickson is the partner of hunger striker Christian Lopez. Christian was part of the hunger strike in the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma before he was transferred to a jail in New Mexico, where he's continuing the strike. He's facing deportation to Mexico. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Let us begin right now with Mara Villalpando. Tell us exactly what you understand is happening in Tacoma.
Well, we have now hundreds of people deciding to stop eating since Monday at noon. We had word from people in detention over the weekend that they were getting ready to do this hunger strike. We began with a few numbers. I mean, if you think about the maximum capacity there, 1,575. And we know that it's over capacity. So when we heard that about 100 people, a little bit more than that, were getting ready to strike, we were there ensuring that we will support that. And throughout the week, we saw numbers increasing and increasing. More and more people start joining. Yesterday morning, we heard from the women's section saying that they were ready to also join the strike. And we heard from one of the areas that we had contact from the beginning that they were being threatened with being transferred to a county jail in Oregon, and therefore they decided to stop. But other pods continue joining. And so as of now, we believe we have about 700 people, maybe more than that. It's difficult sometimes to get communications from the inside. Even in one pod, people decided to add a work stoppage, acknowledging that they are the backbone of that detention center. They also called for a boycott of the commissary and the telephones as well.
Alexis Erickson, tell us about Christian Lopez, your partner, who's on hunger strike and has been transferred now from the Geo prison to New Mexico.
Well, he was transferred about 3 days ago. On his way over there, he was treated wrong. He asked one guard that was an ICE guard that was on the bus with him if he speaks Spanish. They were just very rude to him, because he was asking for another guy that spoke Spanish only. When they got there, they said that they lost a lot of people's property, which was not true. He ended up getting his property a couple hours later, but he had to fight just to get his bags. They've just all been treated very wrong, and they said that there is a couple people where he is that are still doing the hunger strike.
Have you seen changes in the prison? How long has Christian Lopez been held there, and have you seen changes since the Trump administration took over?
He was put in Oregon in February. He did his 20 days he had to do. He was still stuck for another month before he even got switched to Tacoma. When he got switched to Tacoma, he got off the bus the first time and they put him right back on. He ended up going back to Oregon again because they just said your court date's revoked. So he had to come back again. He came back for his court date on April 6th, and he finally got deported 2 days ago, and he was treated really bad in the Tacoma facility.
You have how many children together? Are they American citizens?
Yes.
How old are they?
I have a 7-year-old, I have a 2-year-old, and an 8-month-old.
Maru Mora Villalpando, can you talk about the fact that this is a for-profit prison and what difference you think this makes? They're being sued under slavery, anti-slavery laws in Aurora, in a jail there. What about in Tacoma?
Yeah, we know this is one of the largest detention centers in the West Coast and the nation. They make a lot of money out of engaging our families in there, $165, I believe, per day per person. And the jobs that people are getting paid to do inside for $1 a day is not everything that they do inside. We have reports that people are asked to paint the walls or wax the floors in exchange for having a piece of chicken or a piece of candy. And sometimes not even that. They're just promised that, and that doesn't happen. We also have seen a lot of reports that the food is always bad, but sometimes it's not only that, it's the fact that the portions are getting smaller. And when people complain about that, Geo guards say, well, there's just too many of you. What do you want us to do?
We have to leave it there, but we're going to continue the conversation after the show and post it at DemocracyNow.org. We're speaking with Maru Mora Villalpando with Northwest Detention Center Resistance and the group Mi Gente, and Alexis Erickson, whose partner is hunger striker Christian Lopez. As a result, he was sent to a New Mexico jail from Tacoma. That does it for our broadcast. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.